very sensitive one, in the sense that we have not, as Africans, contributed in the environmental problems that we are all facing now globally, especially the climate change. Nevertheless, now we are having new responsibilities towards this challenge as a global challenge for everybody, that we have to work together to achieve limitation for the emissions that is threatening our planet. In this sense, it is not a national issue, not a regional issue, but it's a global issue. Africa will try to, as much as we can, to not only to advance our cause, but to work with others to try to achieve the target that we need all as human beings to achieve, which is the preserving of environment. Because environment is becoming a cross-cutting issue on all and in every activity of mankind. To translate that, we have to understand that environment is either an enhancer for development or an obstacle for environment. So when we understand that preserving environment will help the development through, for example, renewable energy and best known practices for the sustainable development, we will be on the right track. If this concept is not grasped, we will be facing more and more environmental issues. With this concept and with these ideas, we're trying to coordinate and to work together with the African colleagues to achieve our targets, not only on negotiations, but to coordinate an African position and a national plan on the national level to achieve our goals in sustainable development and climate change and all other issues related. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to manage. Your Excellency Minister Penedelis Mahogany, Minister of Tanzania, outgoing President Amson, Mr. Achim Steiner, the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program, and an old friend of ours, Ambassador Mahmoud Sami. Dear participants, good afternoon to you all. I don't have to reiterate what has been said. There is not much to add, but Egypt, with open hearts and arms and minds, we do welcome Amson back to Egypt after 30 years. We want to thank the Tanzanian government, the Tanzanian president, Tanzanian environmental minister, for all the efforts they have provided throughout the last 2.5 years. And we want to promise, and they should rest assured, that we will continue the path and we will continue all the steps and all the activities that they have initiated. All for the sake of a better Africa in terms of economic, environment, and social equity. Needless to say that the past 30 years, though we were talking a lot about development and environment, lately we have recognized the strong relation, the really strong relation between economics and the environment. The green economy is one manifestation of the changes in policies of instruments to reach sustainable development. Africa, with 6 out of 10 fast-growing economies, still have a poverty that's over from 30 to 40%. We still have unemployment of 10 to 12%. 800 million young people needs food, job, and basic needs. A rapid population increase impacting the quality of the environment and the basis of the capital resources. This, and we are facing the challenges of climate change and going into the final rounds of the deliberation and negotiations on the climate change. We're addressing the new SDGs, and Africa has a role to play, a big role to play. It is with honor that we address at this very critical moment that Egypt addresses the presidency of the AMSON, and will work together with our brothers on reaching and crystallizing a one unique position in our next round of negotiations, whether in the SDGs or in the climate change. This was emphasized today by President Sisi, who is the head of the Committee for African State Presidents on Climate Change, and the role of AMSON in these challenges were underlined, and he is supporting 100% AMSON, Egypt being the president of AMSON, and he will give us all the support that we need. We all looking forward for a better cooperation. We want to move from talk into walk. We want to start implementation of the flagship programs, whether they are addressing renewables, they are addressing sustainable development, they are addressing wildlife and biodiversity issues, or addressing desertification and the better use of water and land. All are targeting poverty and better job creation, more green jobs, and more green incomes. With that, I'd like to end my remarks, and I hope that we can address whatever questions you have in the next minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before we open the floor to your questions, I just wanted to alert you that today UNEP presents to the AMSON a very important report, which is this one. We will have a photo opportunity later. The report is called Africa's Adaptation Gap Report. It is report number 2. The first one was presented last year to the AMSON. And basically, this report says that even if the international efforts lead to limiting emissions to 2 degrees Celsius, yet the adaptation cost for Africa is going to soar. Now, what is interesting is that this report actually looks at closing the funding gap, and it explores the extent to which African nations can contribute to closing the adaptation gap, especially in the area of identifying the resources that will be needed internally. So we have the press release in Arabic and in English. We have the experts amongst us, so if you want interviews on that, please let us know. And now the floor is open to your questions. Feel free to ask in Arabic or in English. Identify your name and who you represent, and I can see Shahira Amin back there.
Yeah.
Do we have a roaming mic? Can I ask my colleagues, do we have a roaming mic? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Shahida Amin from Nile Television. I'm sure that there is an adaptation gap between the different African countries. Now, will you be coordinating? Will they support each other? Countries that are doing better, adapting to climate change, are there lessons to be learned? And which countries are doing well, and which countries need the most help? Thank you.
I'll ask maybe Mr. Steiner to take this question.
Let me first of all say the report is not necessarily a report yet that is comparing individual African nations to each other. It is taking the continent of Africa and relating the latest science that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, but also African researchers, universities, climate change centers have generated in understanding what are the implications of a warming world on the African continent. For instance, we could envisage by the end of this century already African coastlines, which as you can imagine affects many, many countries on the continent, having to face sea level rise anywhere between 50 centimeters to 80 centimeters, for instance. The implications on coastal infrastructure are enormous, whether it is port infrastructure, whether it is housing, roads. These are the kinds of factors that the Adaptation Gap report is examining. But it may also have implications in terms of health impacts. As the continent may face different climate phenomena, we may see the migration of diseases. We may see agricultural productivity being affected. And to give you another very crass example, when dams were built in the 20th century, they were based on 100-year hydrological cycle models. What the climate science is telling us that the hydrological, i.e. rainfall patterns, water flows, will not be the same in the future. Therefore, a dam that might have worked 100 years ago or even 50 years ago may no longer produce hydropower. So the vulnerability of the continent's economy, infrastructure, people, is increasing significantly. What the report is pointing to is that the world needs to comprehend what this means for Africa, first of all, and as the ministers have said, a phenomenon that is not caused by African activity, but a consequence of global, our current state of knowledge. We will need to evolve this, and with every year that passes, more information becomes available, more details are also available to planners in order to look at adaptation as an inevitable part of our future economic and development reality. Thank you.
I think, please, Dr. Mahengi.
Maybe as a matter of what we can learn during the discussions in Peru, we were not able to show that Africa had been affected very much in the climate change, especially adaptations, because in the 5th report of IPCC, there were no research conducted particularly for Africa. So there were no statistics which prove that we have been affected. What does that mean? It means African countries should invest in research in the climate change so that we can have our own information, and it will be easy now to tackle the problem. So the lesson here is to invest and do the research with our own situation in our own countries, instead of waiting the results of research by other countries who, when they do, they always aim to meet their own goals.